Okay, welcome back to another episode of Offbeat Adventures. We're standing here once again on the grade of the former Canadian Northern Railway and later Canadian National Railways, Dorion, and then subsequently Kinghorn subdivision. We are just on the west side of this large bridge over the Pastagani River here in the municipality of Greenstone. We are just south of the twin communities of Macdiarmid and Biinjitiwaabik Zaaging Anishinaabek. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be picking up where we left off on the previous hike. So we were here last spring around this time doing this section here. And so what we're going to do is we are going to be working our way to the south here along what is known as Pijitawabik or Pijitawabik Bay, all the way close to Orient Bay Station. This is a redo. So we did this section previously. We did this. This is actually one of my first this was the first hike that I did up in this area, so just anywhere outside of kind of closer to Thunder Bay. So I did this back in July of 2020, and so there's a lot more stuff that we're going to see. It's springtime. It's actually a, lest I say it, blistering hot day. It's very warm already. It's 10 o'clock. It's 16 degrees Celsius. It says it feels like 20. I am just melting already. I don't know if you can see. I have a short sleeve shirt on, which was a good idea, but I should have put my shorts on. It was a little chilly this morning, and I went, maybe I should still wear my pants. Bad idea. All right, so we're working along here. We do have Luna with us, and I do have Luna Cam activated. So we'll see how that looks and how that goes. This is a very busy section. There is a lot going on. So I'm going to start right away with our history lesson. So this line was built by Canadian Northern Railway between 1911 and 1914. It was going to be one of the final pieces in Canadian Northern's transcontinental ambitions. Sorry, there's bad sections of ballast on this area. And the Canadian Northern Company got their start in Manitoba way back in 1896 by building sections of grade and acquiring charters in that area. Their first big project was building a line between the then city of Port Arthur, which is now Thunder Bay, and Winnipeg, and that occurred between 1899 and 1902. And so we're going to pause here for a second in our story. What we have is we actually have a culvert. I didn't think it was in this area, but so what we have, you can't see much from this side. We're actually going to go down on the, so we're heading south. Got to get keep my direction straight. So that's the east side. This is the west side. We're going to go down on the west side and have a look at that. All right, so we're down here below the level of the grade. I didn't quite expect to see this. We're quite a ways down. You can see the top of the grade up there. I don't know, we're probably 30 feet down. So what we have, it's very difficult to see because there's a big plug of ice, but it looks like this piece of wood here looks like it's a tie that's come down. But this is basically looks like a rock culvert. So if I come here carefully, you can see that there's water flowing in between this area here. It looks like it's very heavily eroded, so there has been some damage to it. You can see all in here. But certainly there's still quite a volume of water that's flowing through. You can, obviously I have to yell to be heard. Just have to be careful here. You can see there's more flowing over there. I don't think I can get over there without going all the way up and around. So, okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna hop back up on the grade and just continue making our way to the south. So as I was saying, Canadian Northern's first big project was building that line between Port Arthur and Winnipeg. And then they began building lines all throughout the prairies. And they also started building north, acquiring lines and building some lines north from Toronto into the Sudbury area. Now eventually what ended up happening was Canadian Northern realized that in order for their company to be viable long term, you can see some of the cutting here. This is going to be kind of very prevalent in this this area, that they would need a transcontinental connection. I believe That rubber thing there is a piece of a ballast regulator. Helps kind of keep the ballast in the right place. So they needed a transcontinental connection. Unfortunately, the company was not very keen on building a line between the Sudbury area, specifically Ruel, and Port Arthur, because the construction was going to be very difficult and therefore very expensive. And they were kind of a little bit concerned about sort of the profitability of it. They did try to get a running rights agreement with Canadian Pacific and looked at a bunch of other options, but unfortunately none of it panned out. So they were forced to build. And so again, the construction lasted from 1911 till 1914. So on New Year's Day 1914, the last spike was driven, and this line opened for traffic in 1950. Now unfortunately, the costs of constructing sections like this, and you're going to see one of the reasons why very shortly, and places like in the mountains of British Columbia, basically, and then coupled with World War I, all the financial stresses of World War I, essentially bankrupted the Canadian Northern Company. And so in 1917, they had to be taken over by the Canadian government. And a year later in 1918, they were forced to merge, amalgamate, whatever you want to call it, with a bunch of other Canadian government-owned bankrupt lines known as the Canadian Government Railways. And so that merger created the Canadian National Railways. And so in 1923, when the nationalization process was completed, the name of this line changed. It went from the Nipigon subdivision of Canadian Northern Railway to the Dorion subdivision of Canadian National Railways. And it continued as such until 1960, when there was a major reorganization with CN. They changed their name from Canadian National Railways, plural, to Canadian National Railway, adopted their more modern worm logo. And then what they did was they merged this line, which was known as the Dorion subdivision, and the more easterly Kinghorn subdivision into one line running from Long Lac to then Port Arthur, and then later the city of Thunder Bay. And it continued until 2005, when they decided to discontinue service on the line, and beginning in 2008 they began ripping up the rails, and that process was complete by 2010. Okay, so we're going to hold up for a second here right beside this rock cut, and then we're going to get going again. All right, so we've got a bunch of stuff happening here. So first of all, this is around about the point where milepost 88 on the line is supposed to be. I didn't see a marker. Sometimes they're pulled out, sometimes they're chopped off. We'll keep an eye out for that. So milepost 88 is on the Kinghorn line. So for the original lines, we need to subtract 49.7 because the original line started in Jellicoe, not Long Lac. And so that mileage would become 38.3. All right, and so the other big thing that we have happening here is you can see this massive rock cut right beside us. And so this is just a continuation of the rock work that we picked up farther back in an area known as a stop called Farlinger, which is much farther to the north. And so basically what we're doing here is we are skirting this body of water here, which is part of Lake Nipigon. It's one of the bays of Lake Nipigon. So this bay is called Pijitawabik or Pijitawabik Bay. The name comes from the First Nations people that live in this area. The word Pijitawabik or Pijitawabik means basically Bay of the Rock Faces. And so you see these huge cliffs along here, and obviously this was very challenging to build through here. Now, just as a little side note, a little shout out to Joanne for this information. So apparently there may have been a mistranslation with the name of this bay. So the nearby First Nation community, which for many years went by the name Rocky Bay First Nation. More recent times, they've been using their more traditional name, which is Biinjitiwaabik Zaaging Anishinaabek. There may have been a mistranslation in the word Pijitawabik. Maybe it was actually Biinjitiwaabik, the same as the community. So that's kind of a neat little thing. It's just an absolutely gorgeous body of water. We're going to see a little bit better. You can see how calm and beautiful it is. And you can see these massive rock cuts. And so again, I'm going to put this up on the screen here. I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to show you some employee timetables. So basically what happened here is because of these massive cliffs that started well to the north, again, a place called Farlinger, which is north of Macdiarmid, you basically had the railway line building beside these huge cliffs alongside the railway grade. And this is one of the biggest ones. You can see the top of that cliff. It has to be 50 feet or more. Hopefully you can see that okay. I mean, the sun is, obviously we're looking to the east and the sun is coming up. And so obviously we're probably backlit a little bit, but you can see the massive size of these cliffs. And so again, those timetables that I showed you basically indicated that there were rockfall warnings all throughout here, right from Farlinger, which I believe is milepost 34.5 on the original line. As I mentioned, we are 38.3 here, all the way down closer to Orient Bay Station. And we're going to see these massive rock cuts all along here. And you can see some of the work that they've tried to do to try to mitigate some of that rockfall. So this is all concrete work here. So you can see all the concrete that's been put on here. You can see some of it is flaking off. So the facing of it is coming off. Over here, you can see an even larger piece of concrete, and you can see this one's actually right underneath this ledge here, and you can see the bolts. I don't know what the proper term is for those. I'll see if I can find it. But basically, though, that's similar to what they do in mining when they try to shore up the tunnels and the work that they're doing underground. They will drive these bolts in, and basically it helps sort of keep everything into place, right? You'll notice that, I mean, it is prone. You can see some of the rock fall that's happened here. And so again, that is a very, very common problem. I'm just keeping my eyes out for this milepost marker. The 89 one is been cut off, and there was just a little sort of nub sticking up, and I just happened to see it by accident. So I'm just keeping my eyes open, so if I can see that, maybe the little nub of it sticking up. I'm not seeing anything right now. Lots of debris, lots of remnants in this area. So here, essentially you can see the remains of a telegraph pole. You can see 1, 2, 3 Dominion 42 insulators. It looks like they're all busted, or at least some of them are. Again, no trace of that milepost marker. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna hold up for a second, and then we're gonna keep plugging our way to the south.